for everyone else. Welcome, everyone. This is going to be a session about security, about the vulnerability reporting and the latest changes that have happened in August. It's not a revolution, but it's a good moment to do a refresher. So let's start with the plan for today. So I will get through the vulnerability process for both the receiving side and the reporter. I will go talk about what is a CNA and how we do it at the Eclipse side. And then we'll get through the CNA rules and how they apply to your project. And then we'll have a question answer time, and you can ask any question about the security at the Eclipse Foundation that you have. So let's get started. Vulnerability reporting is for everyone. So you may either receive a vulnerability report or you might find something that looks like a vulnerability. And then what to do. So let's start from that side. You have found something that could be a vulnerability, it's a crash, a denial of service, the application doesn't respond as fast as it should be anymore. So what to do? Go to the source code of the project, have a look if they have a security MD file. If they have it, there should be written in how you should contact that project for security issues. Typically, a mailing list or the link to the tracker. So the default one that we offer for Eclipse project has the security mailing list of the Eclipse Foundation and the vulnerability tracker that we host on the Eclipse Foundation GitHub. And that applies to every project. Projects may also decide to use private reporting at GitHub if they please to do so. So if they have a security MD, you already have the information. If they don't, you may have a look at the README if they have one, or have a look at the security page of the project. For Eclipse Foundation projects, if you can't find anything, you go to the eclipse.org security page and you will find the information how to do it if the project doesn't have any specific information. So then you report the bug. That is not much different from any bug reporting you have ever done. But the only difference is that you report that issue privately, because we do not want the attackers to know about it before it gets fixed. So we report to the project privately, we give them a little bit of time to fix, and then everything goes public as in the typical open source way. So please do not report security issues on IRC, public mailing list, public issues. Find a confidential way for that particular project. In the report, include the typical information, what is the version that is affected, how to reproduce the issue. If you have a code, for example, it's a library call and a specific use of a library, then if you have some example code that provided also so that the project team has all the information that they may need to report. Then when you have sent that, you wait for the assessment from the project. They may ask you for additional clarification. There's nothing unusual in this case. And when they release a fix, you apply it to your code, and then you can tell everyone that you have found a security vulnerability in that specific project. Now, what happens when you are on the other side, when you receive the report? So you may get it by a ticket in the vulnerability reports. You may get it through a GitHub private report, a private email that happens from time to time still, a pigeon message, anything can happen. We have seen every possible method for such report. no matter the way the reporter contacts you, what is important is what they have to tell you. So you get the data they gave you about the potential issue, and you do the assessment. The first important question is it really a security issue? So does it affect confidentiality, integrity, or availability of your project? If it does, it's a security issue. If it's not, if it doesn't affect those properties, then it's a typical bug, so you can downgrade the ticket to a typical bug and process it as a typical bug. You should follow as usual when dealing with bugs, so trying to reproduce and confirm to the reporter if it's a security issue or ask for clarifications. Then the typical rule is that the security issue should get fixed pretty rapidly. The recommendation from the Eclipse Foundation is 90 days or whatever you agree between the researcher and you. There may be some other constraints that they want this to be public earlier, or you may have additional constraints to wait a little bit longer because of some other dependencies that need to be fixed, or the issue is too complicated to release rapidly. What we recommend is that you make the fix in a private repository, in a private fork, and then you test it. You may include other committers from the project who have experience in that kind of issue to make sure there are no regressions, because nothing worse than a security issue causing regression somewhere else. We don't like that. Nobody likes that. So when it's properly tested, you merge it to your code and release. If you can do a bug fix series and you have a process for that, the better for everyone. And then you can document it in the release notes as you do usually. So more or less, the security process is the same as a typical bug fixing process. Just make sure that there is time for everyone to fix the bug rapidly and confidentially, so that the attackers won't learn about it until the fix is ready. Now, the Eclipse Foundation is a CNA. Now, what is the CNA? All those abbreviations that show up in this area. To get to CNAs, we will start with CV. You've probably heard about CVs like CV 2023 12345, and basically this is a ticket number. A ticket number in the vulnerability database. You have the prefix CV, you have the year in which it has been discovered, and you have unique number, and no more magic in there. Now, how it works and what are CNAs? CNAs are organizations that assign those CV numbers. CNAs are either vendors of the program, of the solution, the product, or foundations, like in the case of the Eclipse Foundation. So each CNA has an API available to Mitch, that is handling the complete database, to assign CVs. And each CNA also has scope. A scope is a definition of what each CNA is handling. In the case of Eclipse Foundation, we have a copy of the scope just on the slide, and the scope says all projects hosted by the Eclipse Foundation as listed at eclipse.org/project and services provided by the Eclipse Foundation to support open source projects as listed at Eclipse Status.io. Basically, it covers all Eclipse projects and the services that the foundation is developing and providing to projects. Why is the scope important? Because you cannot ask the Eclipse Foundation CNA to assign a CV that is for a project handled by someone else. Each project is in scope of some CNA, and you should ask always the CNA that is the closest in scope to the project. And also, if there are changes to the CV entry, so someone wants to modify the description of the vulnerability, they have to go to that specific CNA and not anyone else. For the Eclipse Foundation, that's the security team that is managing the CNA. And CNAs have a common rulebook so that they all act in a more or less the same way. The handbook or the rulebook is updated regularly, and the last update has been just done, and it applies since August 2024. Now, what important cases does it cover? It doesn't mean that they weren't covered before, but there were some clarifications. As always, they clarify a little bit, taking into account the current usage and what we see among the assignment, the conflicts that show up between CNAs. So there's some clarifications every time so that everyone works the same way. First, on the assignment side, you must always ask the CNA that is closest in scope, not someone else. So in the case of Eclipse Foundation project, all CV IDs for Eclipse projects should go through the Eclipse Foundation CNA and not through employees or employees of the committees, supporters of each project, security research companies. No, they should all go through the Eclipse Foundation CNA. Then CVs can be assigned to different types of products, not only software. That has been also clarified in our case. That doesn't change very much, apart from websites maybe. Then there's a reminder for everyone. You should never use the CV ID that has been reserved by the security team before the complete record is published. So when you request a CV ID, the Eclipse Foundation security team will give you the ID, but before we publish, of course agreeing with you, you should never use it publicly in release notes and commit messages and all different places. And then they clarify one thing. If when researching that vulnerability, you figure out that the issue is actually in some upstream dependency, some other project, be it Eclipse project or not, doesn't matter, you must contact that project and the CNA about this issue. Then finally, the rules are quite flexible and there's much to the interpretation, and there's not many musts because a lot depends on the particular situation. And in the case of disagreements, the root CNA, so Mitru decides. For me, it has never happened to go through Mitru. We always manage to resolve everything between the project affected, the researcher, and the security. Now, what is or isn't the CV? I reminded that a bug in an unsupported version, it can and will get a CV ID. You cannot say that this version is unsupported, so I'm not going to release a CV. You can say this version is not supported. I will never release a fix for this issue. That's okay, but it will still get a CVE. The rationale behind it is that people see that all versions have unfixed vulnerabilities, and that should incentivize them to go and use the more up-to-date version. If there's a deliberate bug in research or demo code, this is not a CVE, on the other hand. Now, insecure configuration, by default, it is a vulnerability. But if you have an insecure configuration that is well documented as such, and it's not default, so the user has to use some specific option like saying that they state that they know that this is unsafe and they still want to use that feature, this is not a CVE. We frequently have cases where projects share similar code, implement similar features, or there are bugs in dependencies. So there are a few rules around this subject. If there's a bug in a dependency, and that dependency has a CVE, and you just include that dependency, and there's no specific code on your side that is creating the vulnerability, then in the description you just use the dependency CVE ID. There's no need to allocate a new one. If there is the same code copied amongst projects, the copy and paste basically without any other changes, this is typically one CVE for all of them. We can decide to do it differently, but by default this one CVE. But if there's a similar issue in multiple projects, for example, and a problem of the implementation of the HTTP protocol, we have seen a few of them in the recent years, then each project get its own CVE for this one. And finally, if there's a dot, if you are unsure if this one should get or should not, then let's assign a CVE for this one. We can reject it later. There's a project of rejecting a CVE. So when we finally realize that there's no vulnerability, we can reject the CVE instead of rejecting it to the report. Now, there have been a few clarifications about the public disclosure. What it means, public disclosure, this is a pretty important definition. Of course, a public disclosure is if there's a public advisory, blog post, or something else about the vulnerability. But also, if the issue is mentioned in the release notes, or if a commit is present in a public repository, Mitra and the CVE program consider this as a disclosure. And when an issue is disclosed, everyone can ask for a CVE, and then the CNA has 72 hours to answer. It's pretty important because the time is pretty much limited here. So the implications, we have the websites that may get vulnerabilities. Default unsecure configurations are officially sources of CVEs right now, and unsupported end-of-life versions can also get CVEs. And the 72 hours rule, that is important for the communication between the security team and projects, because we may need to contact your project in 72 hours to get your assessment of the issue. If we cannot, then we'll have to decide on our own if we assign or not. So it's better that the security team has up-to-date communication methods with your project. If you're unsure if we have, contact us and we'll figure out, we'll note down how you want to be contacted to make sure we can have this communication run. So that was the short review of all of the important things that you need to know about vulnerability reporting and the new CV rules. I will stop sharing now because then I will see if there are any raised hands, and I will be able to read the chat. So are there any questions? Are you surprised by any of the elements that are in those rules, by anything in the process? Let me know.
Hello, Marta. Sorry, I cannot find the control to raise the hand in the Zoom application.
Go forward, Alexander.
But I have a question. So the rules you describe it are more or less clear, instead of one very important point for me. How exactly the project committer could determine if particular report is security issue or not? So let's imagine the sharpest situation. Then you have 72 hours to find some committer, and I can imagine that it could be me, right? For example. And then you describe a situation, and I need to assess it. Do you have some checklist to make some conclusion regarding that, or how could you help us to understand? Because I saw very funny notes, for example, from YAML parsers, people who told that if code scanner found some potential vulnerability, don't believe them because we do not open connection to internet or whatever else. So this sounds very naive because, you know, but it's really hard to understand if this particular defect in the program could be used by attacker or not without special, let's say, skills. Yeah, please give us an advice.
Yeah, so there's the triad of the security, the three features. So the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If one of them is affected, example, confidentiality, the user data is being sent unencrypted in certain situations. Integrity, someone who should not have rights to modify the data can modify it. Or availability, basically the application crashes and it's a typical case. If it looks like that, then it's likely there's a probability that there is a vulnerability. Of course, it may require more analysis to figure out if it could be really exploited in the real situation. Projects often receive automated report, as you mentioned, from fuzzers, tools that try to execute everything possible, and sometimes the reports are useful, but sometimes there are reports that are happening really in a situation that cannot happen in the real situation. So my rule is that if you as a developer have a feeling that it could be exploited, then we can assume for the time being it is a vulnerability. Remember that we can reject the vulnerability later on when we figure out it's not your project, or when we figure out it's not your project but it's in the dependency. So we can always reject later on. And if you are pretty much sure that this is a condition that will never really happen, or there's no way to exploit that. It's not a vulnerability. We receive different kinds of reports, and we get with the experience over time. We can also, at the security team, if you are unsure, you tell us that you're unsure, we can give you our feeling, but we have less knowledge on your code that you have. So we can have a chat about the feelings of everyone in the given time, and then go for a bigger evaluation or not, depending on what we find in the first one. Hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. I have another question. Maybe you have a plan. The question maybe not only for you, but also for IT staff that I can see in the list of participants. Do you have a plan, any automation that could help us? I mean, some code analysis, at least for classic Eclipse technologies, like Java-based Eclipse plugin, that maybe some static analyzer that could help us to identify potential vulnerability. Do you have such plans?
There are already some possibilities of enabling tools. Currently, mostly on GitHub hosted projects. So yeah, and we also have experiences from security audits of a few projects. In those security audits, basically the auditors used automatic tools, and then they triaged the results to find those that are potentially dangerous. So depending on the exact project you aim to, we can point you to the right audit, and how in the audit documentation you have a description of how they did it, what were the exact rules, and if the programming language matches, for example, that could be something that you can reuse for your own project. So contact us for that, and we can have a longer chat about how we can set it up for you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Do we have someone else with a question or two?
Yeah, I have a question. How is the workflow for projects which are not officially released in a major version? I mean, we're working on a project that's already open source, but we're still in the 0. something. And we are saying officially that we are in development and this is not production ready, so to speak. Should we still follow the complete full-blown process then? Or we should start it right before we actually release the first version?
So if you clearly mark that your code is not production ready, the first important thing is to make sure that you mark it clearly, that there's no one who will actually take and start using it in production. Right. We have seen many different things happen. And then the CVE is applied to projects that are publicly available. So technically, and you are using in open source, so technically someone may request a CVE to your code. So it could happen, but it's way more likely that that it happens after the first official version.
Yeah.
And I recommend you that you do a serious security review of any unsafe features that may have been there for development purposes before you do the first review.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot.
If you have questions about how to do it, about recommendation of and guidelines, then contact us. We can have a chat about the best practices.
All right, thanks a lot.
Yeah. I think there was David who wanted to ask a question also.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask when will be established those security teams, or now we are receiving just as leaders, 3 leaders of Glassfish are receiving all those security reports. But I would like if other committers will be able to see them too.
Okay. Glassfish, you are quite numerous committers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are quite large project.
Yeah. There are quite many of you. So, if you could confirm us with all the project seats that you want all the committers to be the security team, then we go this way from now on.
I think we already wrote that somewhere, but I'm not sure.
If you could reiterate that from you, so then we make it absolutely clear that.
Okay, so I will ask those 2 remaining leaders too for sure, and if we agree, okay.
If I remember correctly, there were some of committers who have never logged to GitLab yet.
Oh yeah, and we asked them to do that, to do so. Maybe there were some remaining, so maybe.
Okay, but if most of them set up, that's going to be it's going to be okay.
Okay.
So go. So yeah. We for Glassfish we'll move to adding way more of you.
I'm not sure if I can see which never logged to GitLab. Can I?
You can, but it's a little bit too tricky. You put their logins on the GitLab. You look at your profile on GitLab, and there's a link with a username. If you replace that username by usernames of any other committers, either you see the page and then it means they logged in, or there's 404 and that means that they have never logged in.
I'm not sure if I know their usernames. Oh, okay, those can be. Yeah, I know. Yeah, thank you.
We can have a look again at that to figure out if everyone managed to log in.
Okay,
we're going to solve it. Thank you.
And yet one question. You told something about 90 days. If this time will be exceeded, what can happen then?
So this is a policy, and it also depends on the report. The history of the 90 days is a pretty long one, and basically 90 days was introduced by security researchers who were unhappy about vendors not responding to the request. And they said, okay, if you are not going to respond in 90 days, I'm going to publish it on the website, and shame on you.
Okay.
But if the researchers have that strict policy, if there's no trace of goodwill from the vendor, we can say like that. If you communicate with them and there's a good reason why you cannot make it in 90 days, we always manage to find an agreement.
Okay.
Except for some cases, like they have already written that in a paper that has been accepted to a conference, and that conference is coming, right? In this case, we cannot do anything.
Okay, I understand.
But in most cases, we manage to discuss in a friendly way, and they can understand that. For example, because of the risk schedule, that's going to take a little bit longer because you want to have all those features together and then get the release.
Thank you.
Thank you. Evelyn.
Yeah, just from a practical standpoint, to get a CVE requested at the security team of the Eclipse Foundation would be then to open a GitLab issue marked as confidential. As
I will just wait a sec. I will post the link because we have a special repository just for that with a form, everything. I've put the link to the chat in the chat.
Great, thanks.
So just fill the form. If there's something that you are not able to fill in because you do not know yet how to do it, or that's unsure because you are still in the investigation, just fill what you can, and we are going to work together about filling in all the information.
Okay, so this is a different issue template than the usual one for just getting into contact, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Thank you. Do we have any other question? If you have any other question that comes to your mind later on, contact us. Later, there's a security mailing list. You can find us in GitLab issues. Generally, you know how to find the security team. If not, send an email to security mailing list, and we are going to contact you so that we can discuss your problems. And remember that we offer you the help and advice in solving all those issues. So if you have any questions, let us know. And I will stop the recording right now.